In this clip I want to go over a trick I use to debug a ZXP file. So when you are using CEP extensions or building CEP extensions, you can normally not debug the installed version. So once you've built a ZXP, there is no debug information in the final product, which means that you cannot debug it after installing. But there is a trick to do it, and I'll go through the steps involved quite rapidly because those are not really important to the point I'm trying to make. So you can always go back in the video and scroll backwards and forwards a bit to see. So for the demo, I'll be using a little sample project that I create with CEPSparker. So CEPSparker is a free tool on GitHub. You can use it to generate starter projects for CEP. So in itself, it's not a project, but it generates projects. So you normally download the zip. So once you downloaded the zip and unpack it, you get a folder. And in that folder, you need to either pick Mac or PC, Mac or Windows, depending on what your platform you're on. So in this case, I'm on Mac. So when you're decompacting it, you normally need to run initial setup command here. So which is a thing that takes care of the security issues like the quarantining and dequarantining. So, but I've already done that. And then you need to run Sparker config. And Sparker config brings up a screen where you can configure the project it's going to create. So in this case, I'll just create the iframe UI server, which is a little sample project that shows how you can actually have a CEP panel where the content of the panel is coming from a web server. So you can actually have something where the outside of the panel is handled by InDesign and the inside of the panel comes from a remote server. And this is a little sample project that actually demonstrates that, so which is nice to show what I'm doing. So I'll just generate. So I haven't changed anything, I just generated, and you can see there's a whole lot of stuff that gets added into that project folder. So that's okay. So now one of the folders that's created is a little sample server. So what I'll do is I'll open up a command line session into that sample server, and I need node and run the JS file. So that's a very simple server that runs locally on port 8001 using the HTTP protocol. All it does is serve some UI to the panel. So the panel itself has no user interface, and the user interface is coming from that server. The next thing I need to do is essentially package up the extension, but in such a way that it can use the debug information. So instead of the normal packaging tools, I'll use PluginInstaller. So PluginInstaller is something that's part of my creative developer tools, and you can download that from tgrg.net. So you can just download the PluginInstaller, and in the PluginInstaller you have a feature that allows you to package up things. So, and I'll use this to create a ZXP file. Now, before I dive into the packaging, so I made a little product entry. I'm currently in developer mode. So like I'm using the PluginInstaller as a developer. So you can have two use cases, developer and end user. So in this case, I'm a developer. I created an entry for a product, which is a fictitious product, CEPSparker test, with some info. So it's a pretend product, it's not a real product, but I need a product entry to be able to use the package functionality. And then I'll use the package function of the PluginInstaller to create a ZXP file. Now, before I do that, I'll have a manifest here, a manifest file. And this manifest file is a Creative Developer Tools manifest file. And the interesting thing here is the entry inject debug file, which I'll change to true. So by default, inject debug file is false, and then you just get a regular ZXP or a regular package. But you can force a debug file to be injected. And the debug file that will be injected is part of the project. It's here, debug. So that will actually be renamed to period debug. to make it an invisible file on Mac. So, but if you look at it with BB Edit, you'll see that it currently sets the port to 888, so it creates a debug port. So by changing that entry in that manifest for the creative developer tools, I actually told it to package and include a debug file. So the ZXP file is a little bit bigger than a normal ZXP file, and it will include that debug file. So now, what I'll do now is, like, also notice there's no certificates or anything here. So I'll combine everything that ZXP sign command does and the creation of certificates, and I'll just say, take the product entry, package, and then point it to the folder so the tool will automatically find the correct manifest. And I'll just say open. So now behind the screens it's packaging up things and creating both a ZXP and a package file. So the ZXP is a standard old ZXP like you could use with the existing tools. See, now some new files have been created, a package file, which is something that can get installed through PluginInstaller. But there's also a ZXP, which you can install with standard tools like the extension manager. So I'll now use the extension manager to install that ZXP. I have it in downloads, I think, yep. And then go find that ZXP. So, and it's a standard ZXP. And note, the debug flag has not been set. So there's no debug flag active currently in the Creative Cloud. So which means the debugging I'll show you is independent of the debug flag. So all it needs is actually that debug file in the ZXP, and that's a feature of the plugin installer to allow you to make ZXPs that have a debug file inside of them. Finally, so it's installed. So now I can launch InDesign. Go. Again, very slow. Alright, so I'll just move this to my screen here. Okay, I got InDesign. Now look at the extensions. There is a CEPSparker, so that runs. Debug flag has not been set, so it's a proper extension. It loads. It's on a different screen. It's loading. There it is. So this essentially is a panel that contains nothing, and this thing here, hello from server-based panel, that's actually served out by that fake remote server. So you can actually, if we quickly switch here, you can see, so this little node server is actually serving out stuff to fill that panel. But that remote code can still interact with InDesign. So I can click new document, and you see it actually creates new documents as I click. So even though this button is served from a server. Now that's all nice. So this all works. Now I want to show you that this is actually debuggable. So I'll bring up a browser window and I go to localhost. So remember the port was 8888. See, and I can clearly now debug that extension. And the nice thing is also like that it shows me two different potential debug sessions, one for the outside panel, which is and one for the inside of the panel, which is the part that is generated from the from the server provided code. So if I'll just pick this one, you can actually see both of them. So you see like there's a panel HTML that is running in an iframe, and there's the panel itself. And you can just debug as normal. So also like extend script debugging is also just as normal. So if I were to send this ZXP file to an end user and that has trouble with my extension or something, I could then do a debug session on that installed extension in place. So I don't need to do it from here. So that's just what I wanted to show. So the main thing is I have included a debug file into that extension, and I can also, maybe as a final thing, prove that that is true. So if I just go into this folder and make it, I'll just unzip it, and then list, see, like there's a period debug file in this folder. So you can't see it here, of course, because it's an invisible file on Mac, but it's clearly there. So the ZXP did contain that period debug file.